The Anthropology of Human Rights for the fall of 2024. In this course, we're looking at one central question. How do we understand or study or make sense of human rights anthropologically? That is, the course sets out to make a specifically anthropological study of human rights. Now, that implies that we shouldn't start off with sort of a set idea of what human rights are, as if it's just a simple, settled question. Instead, we have to think about how, if at all, human rights arise, fit into, gain expression in human sociality. Of course, human sociality varies from community to community, across time, across space, and so we need then to resist the temptation to think that human rights are just a single thing, everywhere, timelessly, practiced the same way in different places, times, and different communities, and so forth. So I'm going to take a brief digression here. Hopefully it will make sense in a moment. When the Austrian philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein considers how we might think about language, he urges us not to look for something shared by all that we call language. And so he uses an analogy of games. He says, consider, for example, the proceedings that we call games. I mean, board games, card games, ball games, Olympic games, and so on. What is common to them all? Don't say there must be something common, or they would not be called games, but look and see whether there is anything common to all. For if you look at them, you will not see something that is common to all, but similarities, relationships, and a whole series of them at that. To repeat, don't think, but look. In this course, I invite you to take Wittgenstein's suggestion seriously as an anthropological way of examining human rights. Bracket whatever preconceptions we might have about human rights and instead look and see how people think about, practice, protect, violate, promote, resist, and so forth human rights as part of their social lives. Okay, so how might we do this? We'll approach this two main ways in this course. The first section of the course will look at the philosophical and historical backdrop of human rights as they appear, for instance, in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. I pick this because it's kind of the definitive document for what we take to be human rights, what governments take to be human rights, what advocates and opponents of human rights understand them to be. And so it's helpful if we first understand the historical and theoretical backdrop to that document so that we can get a handle on the way that people understand human rights in the most accepted form. Secondly, though, we turn to anthropological approaches to human rights. Things will not be quite so simple there. So then, typically, for the Wednesday class each week, you'll find a lecture on YouTube on the same channel where you found this. And then we will meet the following Monday to talk in person about both the readings and the lecture. For Wednesdays then, all you need to do is watch the lecture. Of course, they're posted on YouTube, so you can watch them at your leisure. You can start it and stop it and go back and see things again to try and make sense of what's going on in them. You can do that whenever you like, but of course I've set a time in this course so that if you want a designated time to watch it, you have it. Then on the Mondays when we meet in person, we'll talk about what's going on in the readings and what it is that I had to say about the readings in the lecture. This first week, I'm going to give you kind of a bonus lecture, if you want to think of it that way, where I'll talk about the UN Declaration of Human Rights, that, as I say, very influential document. And what I want to do is just walk through it so that you have a sense of what's there, you have a sense of the kinds of things that have been considered to be definitive of human rights. And I want you to be able to keep those things in mind as we go through the readings for the subsequent weeks, where we talk about the kind of philosophical underpinnings of human rights as they are embodied in this document. The following week, so that will be September 4th, we'll start on the readings by three of the most significant philosophers and political theorists in the formulation of human rights. They will be Immanuel Kant, John Stuart Mill, and John Locke. And we start with Kant. Arguably the figurehead for how we think of human rights as a sort of universal concept. We're going to look at his groundwork of the metaphysic of morals, and that is crucial to understanding the concept of dignity, which is at the very heart of human rights as conceived in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. But then we'll also see how equality and freedom also crop up through a Kantian lens in the Declaration. There's an optional lecture there as well, if you want, on a contemporary philosopher, George Kateb, who elaborates on the idea of dignity, which, as I say, is there's probably no concept more foundational to human rights than the idea of dignity. And so it's worth devoting a little bit of extra time to getting a handle on what's at stake in that concept, which is why I put this extra lecture for the Kateb piece. Now, that it is optional. Kant is a handful all on his own, so you may want to look at the Kateb lecture in order to try and get a better sense of what is going on with the concept of dignity. But as I say, it's optional. You choose how you spend your time. Over the following 3 weeks, we're then going to turn to John Stuart Mill's On Liberty. Here we're going to get a clear conception of the idea of liberty and, in particular, ideas of freedom of expression, free speech, and the relation of the individual and state to society. Again, we're going to see then how these notions crop up in specific articles in the Declaration. Next, we turn to Locke for the following 2 weeks to get his take on property rights and freedom from tyranny. After Locke, we're done with the philosophical section of the course, and we turn to the anthropological portion of the course. Mark Goodale gives us some important historical and theoretical orientation to the tribulations of studying human rights anthropologically. So that we'll see then that when we shift from the abstract notions of human rights that we find in philosophy to the way that human rights actually crop up in people's lived lives, things become complicated. And part of the work of anthropology is to pay attention to the way that things become complicated in our lived existences. Now, to get a handle on the sorts of things that Goodale raises, we'll also then look at Lauren Levy's essay on the paradoxes of Buddhism, secularism, and human rights in Nepal. For the rest of the semester, we're going to look at the assigned text for the course, Harry England's Prisoners of Freedom, Human Rights and the African Poor. And that book is also going to be the subject of your final assignment. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Please note that we're not going to need this book until fairly late in the semester, so you have time to look for used copies of it. There are many of them out there. They're much less expensive than what you'll find new. And so you might want to take some time to shop around a little bit and find one of the cheaper copies. They're out there. And that way you'll still be able to have it in time to start reading before we get to that point in the course. Evaluation. Okay, so we're going to have 3 kinds of evaluation in this course: reading journals, book review, and participation. So the journal entries are an informal style of writing. You don't need to worry about citations there. You can think of them as the notes that you're writing to yourself on the readings. On weeks that have more than one reading, do we have weeks that have more than one reading? Yes, we do. So Goodale, for example. You can just choose one of the readings if you want, or you can try and capture what's going on in all of the readings and put them together in a single entry. They should be about a paragraph long and have 3 parts. 1 or 2 lines to begin with, summarizing the reading's main thesis or argument, right? So you just there want to capture what it is that the writer is, what case the writer is making. 1 or 2 lines, just summarizing that, right? So this is not a lengthy section. You're just trying to get sort of in a nutshell, what is the writer on about? Secondly, 1 or 2 lines describing how the writer supports the thesis or argument. So, is there data involved? Is it based on rhetorical maneuvers? Are there a series of logical inferences that the writer makes? This will be different from one writer to the next. And so what I want you to do here then is pay attention to how it is that the writer is trying to convince you of the validity of his or her position, right? Finally then, this will be a slightly longer section. Explain why you find this piece of writing either convincing or why it fails to convince you, right? So again, what I want you to do is tune in to what it is that you think is working or failing to work in the piece of writing that you've gotten. It might be helpful in some of the cases, so I'm thinking particularly here of Kant, maybe Mill to some extent, maybe Locke to some extent, a list of the key terms so that as you're looking back on it later on in the semester, say when you're going to write your final, the book review, you'll be able to just quickly look back at your journal entry and see, oh yeah, okay, so when I was looking at Kant, these are the key concepts that cropped up in his work. This is what I need to keep in mind if I want to make sense of what he's talking about. Those are up to you, though. The first 3 sections you really have to have, but the list of key terms is optional. That's up to you. All right. You send them to me then by email before the start of the class on Wednesday for which that reading is assigned, right? So I want you reading and sending me the journal entries before you watch the videos. The reason for that is I want you to have arrived at some sense of your own of what the reading is saying. Then you go and watch the video. If what you take from the reading lines up with what I take from the reading, lovely. But if they don't line up, that's interesting. That gives us something to talk about when we meet in person. And so what I don't want is for you to get my take on the readings, then go and read them and have this kind of confirmation bias where you just find in them whatever it is that I've found in them. I want you to do it the other way around. So that's why they're due before the Wednesday class. The way that these break down is on-time entries get 3 points. Late entries, so if you send it to me after the Wednesday, you'll only get 1 point. You'll still get 1 point for doing it, so that's not nothing, but you won't get all 3 points. You'll notice that in the syllabus, I've budgeted 30 points for journal entries toward your final grade. So that would be 10 entries. But you'll also notice there are more than 10 weeks of readings. You can handle this in a couple of different ways. One way is if there's some week that you just can't get the journal entry done on time, that's okay. You can skip it. You can still get 30 out of 30 that way. Not the end of the world. On the other hand, if you want to get extra points, you can think of this as built-in extra credit right in the syllabus. So that if you send me extra journal entries, you'll get points for extra journal entries, whether it's 1 for a late one or whether it's 3 because you get everything done on time. Either way, you do the work, you get the points. The book review. Now, the review has to include citations with page numbers from the book, as well as at least 2 sources from the theoretical readings that we had earlier on, including the American Anthropological Association statement on human rights, which will be available in the course. It's just a very short piece. The readings by Kant, the readings by Mill, by Locke, the ones by Goodale, and the reading by Lauren Leave as well. So any of those, you can pick whichever ones you want to cite and include that in the paper, right? So that the paper is not just going to be your discussion of the book on its own. You're putting the book into conversation with the readings that form the sort of backdrop or the that investigate the anthropological complications of human rights that we've read earlier on in the semester. Let me say this again, though. You must have citations with page numbers in them from the sources that you cite. That means even if you don't have a quotation, but you're just summarizing a passage from one of the sources, you have to have a citation with a page number included. What do you need to do in the review? The following things. First of all, and this is going to look a lot like the journal entries that I was just talking about, but this is going to be formal writing. It's not just for you. This is supposed to be a proper book review. So you have to have, first of all, what England's thesis or argument is. First of all, identify that. Secondly, same thing. Describe how it is that he goes about supporting this argument. He does a number of different things, so you're going to want to pay attention to them. He uses the ethnographic evidence that he gathers, but he also draws on theory, on rhetorical strategies, on logical inferences. And so pay attention to how he puts these things together in order to make his case. Third, explain how the book explores not just questions of human rights, but also of anthropology, right? This is human rights and anthropology together. He is an anthropologist. He is approaching the question of human rights in a specifically anthropological way. So you need to pay attention to that element of his work as well. Finally, explain why the book is convincing or not to you. What are the shortcomings of it? This might be where you bring in some of the theory that we've investigated earlier in the course. Either to say, this is what works in his book for me, or to say, this is what I just didn't find this persuasive or convincing, and here's the sort of the theoretical gap that I find. In any case, so you explain what it is that makes the book work or fail for you. And you might find that different parts of the book are convincing for you and other parts of the book are not. You don't have to have just one view of the entire work as a whole. You can explain why different parts are stronger or weaker. That's totally fine. But then also you want to explain how you see the book positioned with respect to the concepts, arguments, theories, topics, themes intellectual traditions that have arisen earlier on in the course readings. So then, a final point then is that the evaluation doesn't have to be constrained only to those concepts and themes, but you do have to at least position the book with respect to those themes. You can draw in other themes, other concepts, other concerns if you want to as well. Totally fine. But at very least, it has to be in dialogue with the other readings. The review has to be at least 900 words. So that's not a terribly long piece of writing. 900 words is about 3 double-spaced pages. But I'm looking at word count. So I'm not going to look at page count. I'm going to look at word count. And it has to be at least 900 words. Longer is fine if you need to take longer to make the case that you want to make. That's okay, but it has to be at least that 900 words. You should include as well a works cited page where you list all of the sources that you've cited in the review, including the book, but you don't need to include a title page. Do put your name on it though. I know that at the end of the semester you have a million things to do and sometimes things escape your attention. If you don't put your name on it, I don't know whose piece I'm reading necessarily, right? So make sure that you've got your name on it. If you're concerned about how to cite properly, there is an absolutely superb website that will explain referencing, citation style, how to construct a list of works cited, and so forth. That's at Purdue OWL. You can see it here. It's also on the syllabus. As with the journal entries, you have to send your papers in by email. One last thing that I'll say about this. For several years now, ChatGPT and other sort of AI equivalents, including Grammarly for that matter, they exist. It's tempting to turn to them to help you with your paper. So I want to be clear about this from the outset. I will check to see if the papers are written by a human or by a bot or by AI. And if a paper comes back as produced by AI, I will treat it as plagiarism. That means you get 0 on the assignment. It's unfortunate that I have to deal with this, but it comes up every single course that I teach. And so I want to be absolutely clear on what my policy is. I treat papers produced by AI the same way as I treat papers that are plagiarized. They get 0. You'll notice this paper is worth a large proportion of your final grade, so you're not going to be able to pass the course if you don't write your own papers. If you have any questions at all about whether your paper is going to pass muster as your own work, email me before it is due to let me know. So I know some people, for example, like to use a site like Grammarly to check their spelling and grammar. That's fine. Using something like Grammarly as a spell checker, totally fine. Using it to produce writing for you is not. That is the use of AI, and it will come up. When I read it, it will come up as AI, and so then you'll be faced with this problem of having 0 for your final, for the book review, for your final paper. So again, if you have questions about it, you're not sure whether you're coloring within the lines or not, email me ahead of time. Let me know. We can talk about it. I don't like to be punitive, but this is a case where I have to be in order to ensure that the work that I get is actually yours. All right, final thing then. Final form of evaluation is participation. And that just means when we meet in person, participate in the conversation. Come with questions if you have questions. If there are things that are puzzling in the readings or that don't make sense, I assure you there will be plenty in the opening weeks when we're reading the philosophical stuff. Come with questions. Tell me what it is that did not make sense to you, that didn't fit together, whatever it might be, things that you find intriguing or objectionable in the readings, whatever it is. Come to class with those prepared. Let me know, and we'll talk about those things. If you got something different out of the readings than what I present in the lecture, fantastic. That's a great thing to talk about. That's going to be interesting. Come in and tell me what it is that you saw that was different. And we'll go from there. That's what participation entails. So that's it. I look forward to the course, and I will see you on a Monday.